There are 43 brand new commanders coming with murders at Karlov Manor, and I'm going to be ranking all of them in this video. Alright, we begin with the first one. Agris Kos, Spirit of Justice. This is a 4-mana Boros 2/4 legendary creature spirit detective, double strike vigilance, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, choose up to one target creature. If it's suspected, exile it, otherwise suspect it. So Agris is a slow but repeatable removal engine that can also double up as like pseudo evasion too. Like if an opponent has just a single blocker, you can just suspect it, not with the intent of killing it, but just making sure that it cannot block. Or if you want to suspect your own creatures, you can give them menace and give them pseudo evasion that way too. It's very flexible, but at the end of the day, is it that impactful? And in my opinion, no, it's not that impactful for 4 mana. Like, the stats otherwise are pretty nice. A 2/4 double strike vigilance means it's really good at holding equipment, for example, double those combat triggers and whatnot. However, its triggered ability, its main shtick is not that appealing to me for 4 mana. So I'm sorry, old sport, but I'm gonna put you in the meh tier, just kicking things off with a solid meh. Next up, we have Alcuist Proft Master Sleuth? I'm not quite sure about how to pronounce any of those things. I'll have to check back with Seth. But anyway, this is a 3-mana Azorius 3/3 legendary creature human detective. It has vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, investigate, and then you can pay X, a white, and double blue, tap it, sacrifice a clue, you draw X cards, and gain X life. So Sphinx's Revelation, just you gotta activate it and sacrifice a clue as a requirement. ETB, investigate, is not like super exciting or anything, but that's a decent payoff for a clue deck, right? It's a 3-mana repeatable draw engine that doesn't have much of a cost to it. Yeah, it costs a lot of mana, but it doesn't cost a lot of clues, just one to draw your cards and gain life. That's pretty nice, but I think Proft is more of a late game card that you want to be drawing in your clue deck rather than as the commander. I feel like it's kind of a wasted slot in the command zone, but I do really like it in the 99 of clue decks. So Mr. Proft, you're also gonna be in the meh category. I actually quite like it in the 99, so maybe it might be worthy as a commander. You know what? I might brew around it. I might get around to it. It looks kind of cool. Maybe even a detective deck, who knows? Next, we've got Amzu Swarm's Hunger. This is a 5-mana Golgari legendary creature insect shaman. It's a 3/3 flying menace, and other insects you control have menace. Whenever one or more cards leave your graveyard, you may create a 1/1 black and green insect creature token, then put a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to the greatest mana value among those cards. Do this only once each turn. So Amzu is another candidate to be a commander for your Golgari insect deck. And we have 2 other candidates already. We have Grist, which is the planeswalker that can kind of act as a creature. And then we also have Zask. I believe that's the name for it. It's a cool one that lets you cast insects from the graveyard and has like a mill theme. They're all about milling, and they're all about kind of some amount of like graveyard recursion. They're all doing the same thing and supporting insects the same way, and they're all in the same colors. So the question is, which one are you going to put in the 99 and which one are you going to put in the command zone? And I think Amzu is a really nice one for the command zone. It works particularly well with any ways to repeatedly loop cards leaving your graveyard. Like, one card that's fantastic with Amzu is like Tortured Existence, where for 1 mana you can repeatedly swap a creature card from your hand with a creature card from your graveyard, and for as much black mana as you have, you can repeatedly trigger Amzu's ability, making a bunch of really beefy insect tokens. So it really depends what you want to be utilizing the commander with, what cards you like the most. But I like Amzu as a commander, I like Grist as a commander, I like Zask as the commander. It really all depends on what other cool cards you want to be abusing in the 99. Either way though, this is a fantastic addition for anybody who's interested in Golgari insects. Like, the card archetype doesn't have that much support, so it's always nice to see another key piece showing up and another commander potential for it too. So Amzu I like quite a bit. I've never actually brewed a insect deck before, and I won't say like Amzu is super strong or anything, but I definitely might brew around it. I'm very tempted to put it in the will brew section. You know what? I will brew it. We'll get to that. We'll see how many we end up in the will brew section. But Amzu's on the very high might brew, very low end will brew, and we'll see where it ends up by the end of this video. All right, now we're talking. This is a commander I'm very excited about. This is Anzrag the Quake Mole. This is a 4-mana Gruul legendary creature mole god. It's an 8/4, and whenever it becomes blocked, untap each creature control. After this combat phase, there is an additional combat phase. And you can spend 7 mana, 3 double red and double green, and Anzrag must be blocked each combat this turn if able. So Anzrag is a very fun Gruul smashed extra combat commander. All by itself, if you have enough mana, you can just force people to block Anzrag by spending the 7 mana to force them to block. It's only an 8/4, so it might just trade after the first combat, after the first block step. But if you give it like indestructible or pump up its toughness in some way that it won't actually just die, then it gets a lot more potent. So you need to run certain cards to make it good. Anything that will force blocks at a cheaper rate than 7. Like 7 is the backup option for Anzrag, but hopefully you have other cards that make it easier to force blockers, and then any way of making sure Anzrag survives combat, you can suddenly like take out all potential blockers that your opponents have and dish out extra damage on top of that. I'm personally really excited to put Anzrag in the 99 of my Xenagos deck, but at the very same time, you can just as easily have a blast with Anzrag in the command zone with Xenagod in the 99. There's a lot of brew potential around Anzrag. It seems really fun. I love extra combats. And Gruul Smash is just fun. You know what? If you see a mole god as a creature type and you look at it and you look at these things and it doesn't spark joy, then I'm sorry, you're dead inside. All right, Anzrag is in the high will brew territory. I don't think it's going to make the slot for my own paper collection. There is one commander here that actually makes the coveted GOAT selection. Minor spoiler alert, but it is definitely in the will brew territory. I am very excited to play this commander and brew around it. Next up is Apothecary White. This is a 4-mana mono white legendary creature human cleric. It's a 3/4 with vigilance, and whenever you attack, you create a food token for each player being attacked, and you can pay 1 white, tap it, tap X untapped foods you control to create X 1/1 white human creature tokens. Apothecary White is kind of busted, I think, in a food deck, and it's kind of surprising that it shows up in the Clue edition of Ravnica, not the main set, not the Commander set, but rather the Clue edition. So yes, there are some bangers even in the Clue set. This one is just an all-star in food decks. Not only does she make food very efficiently, like if you're attacking each opponent in a 4-player free-for-all game, you can generate up to 3 food tokens per attack phase, and then she can utilize all those foods that you're making for 1 mana, tap her, and then just tap the foods. I mean, the foods are going to be untapped anyway. What else are you using them for? You tap them and you make just a giant army, and that army itself can be attacking and generating more foods. This card is really efficient at flooding the board with food tokens and human tokens, and I love also the fact that you can do it at instant speed too. It's not sorcery speed, so like the end step before you turn, you just make a bunch of humans, then throw an overrun effect or something like that, and like win the game. Apothecary White, all that for 4 mana it's very efficient. It's very good. Now that said, do I want her as the commander? Not really. I think she's really strong, and she's honestly not a bad commander choice anyway. However, if you are trying to go for a food deck, you just get so much more benefit from being in multiple colors. At the very least, you want to be in Selesnya colors, I think. So like, if you put this in a Samwise Gamgee deck, it's going to be fantastic. Frodo and Sam, it's going to be fantastic. However, I think the very best one is actually going to be Merry and Pippin. Because one of those halflings, I forget which one, I think it was Pippin, allows you to just overrun all your creatures and give them haste, which is something you just don't see in Abzan. So it's very easy to set up a turn where you just like tap Apothecary White, tap a whole bunch of food tokens, make a bunch of creatures, and then activate your halflings, your hobbits, to overrun and take out the table. So I think this is an all-star in any food deck, and it is a fine candidate as a commander, but I think it's better in the 99 than the command zone. So Apothecary White is a very exciting. Honestly, I do think it is legit a powerful commander. I'm just more interested in running it in the 99 than the command zone, but I will put it in the Might Brew territory. It might actually be super strong in the command zone too, and I'm just underestimating mono white food. Next, we've got Aurelia, the Law Above. This is a 5-mana Boros legendary creature, Angel. It's a 4/4 flying vigilance haste. Whenever a player attacks with 3 or more creatures, you draw a card, and whenever a player attacks with 5 or more creatures, Aurelia deals 3 damage to each of your opponents and you gain 3 life. Now, Aurelia is pretty exciting, especially as a go wide tokens deck that focuses on like a must attack sub theme. Like there's a couple cards that force your opponents to attack, either like Mass Goad, that's one, you can run like a Disrupt Decorum or whatever to goad all opposing creatures. There's an Overlord version of that gives all of your stuff double strike as well too. Anything like that, because it does trigger on your opponents attacking as well too. So Aurelia by herself enters the battlefield. If you have 2 other creatures when you cast Aurelia and they don't have summoning sickness, you can attack, you can draw a card. If you're attacking with a bunch, and she domes your opponents at the same time and yields a whole bunch of extra damage at the same time. But if you mix in the goad effects, forced combat, then you're also going to be drawing cards off your opponents attacking, and you're going to be doming your opponents and gaining life as well when your opponents are attacking. So this is a really interesting design space. It's attacking, it's Boros go wide combat, which that's not the interesting part, but the fact that it does indirectly promote goad effects and forced combat makes it a little bit more spicy, let's say. Now, if I wanted to go Boros Goad, my ideal commander would honestly still be Nelly Borka for a bunch of reasons. However, if I wanted specifically a go wide combat deck with a Goad sub theme, I think Aurelia the Law Above is perfect for that. So I'm going to put Aurelia the Law Above at the top of the Might Brew category. I really like her. But I do envision her more in the 99 of a bunch of decks, and there is one other Boros commander that focuses more heavily on Goad that I'm personally more excited for, and I'm going to put Aurelia in the 99 for it. But I do expect Aurelia to show up in the 99 of a bunch of decks, honestly. Not just Goad themed decks, but basically like any go wide combat style deck is going to really like Aurelia. I just have other commanders from this particular set that are Boros, that care about attacking, that I'm more interested in brewing in, so the chances of having 2 from the same set being brewed are very unlikely. All right, next up we have Commander Mustard. This is a 5-mana Boros legendary creature human soldier. It's a 5/5 with vigilance, and it says other soldiers you control have vigilance, trample, and haste. And you can pay 4 mana, 2 a red and a white. Until end of turn, soldiers you control gain whenever this creature attacks, it deals 1 damage to defending player. Now, Commander Mustard is a fine commander for the soldier deck. It's not ideal to give your 1/1s, which are mostly what soldiers are, 1/1s trample, but vigilance and haste is nice, and if you have any pump effects, then the trample does become relevant. If you can generate infinite red and infinite white mana, which is easier said than done, especially in Boros colors, then you could just like swing in with a soldier and deal like infinite damage to a defending player. So that's kind of spicy. Is Commander Mustard like the best soldier commander for Boros colors at least? I'm not quite sure. I don't really know that much about soldiers. They're kind of a weak archetype and they don't have that much love and support, but I don't know. This is a 5-mana, 5/5 in the command zone. It just doesn't do enough when it enters the battlefield. I feel like there has to be better soldier commanders out there for it, and this isn't the 99. I'm kind of skeptical on this one. All right, we're gonna put Commander Mustard in the Met category. Like, maybe he's good. maybe if the infinite combos are really easy, he's good. I don't know. What do you think? Is he good? I don't know. Okay, here's an exciting one for me. This is Delny Streetwise Lookout. This is a 3-mana white legendary creature human scout. It's a 2/2, and it says creatures you control with power 2 or less can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater, so a little bit of evasion. And if an ability of a creature you control with power 2 or less triggers, that ability triggers an additional time. So Delny is essentially a Panharmonicon, well, not even a Panharmonicon. It's like a roaming throne for creatures power 2 or less. And roaming throne is basically the commander staple from last year, right? Like, it's been blowing up. It's a rare that's like $20 and still going up in price from one of a very recent set. Everybody loves it. Everybody's jamming roaming throne in a whole bunch of decks. Delny is like that, but a 3-mana version of it, but far more restricted. Instead of focusing on a creature type, it's focusing on power 2 or less. So Delny has a lot less application, but nonetheless, its ability is incredibly powerful. We know that doubling triggers just passively without any sort of cap, without any sort of mana restriction or anything like that, is just very, very powerful, inherently powerful. So I can see actually a powerful commander being built around Delny. You could run like your Spirited Companions to draw 2 cards, you know, like this is the Richard Dream, let's say. Your Welcoming Vampires are going to be triggering and drawing 2 cards. Your Mentor of the Meek or whatever is going to be drawing 2 cards whenever you pay 1 mana. It's going to be great. So there's a lot of usage for Delny just in mono white, just as the commander, which makes her actually worthwhile to brew around. But then also she's going to be like the best card in the 99 of the few commander decks out there that can utilize her abilities so as well as possible. So like Alicia, who smiles at death, her main shtick is creatures power 2 or less. She herself has 3 power, which doesn't work perfectly with Delny, but everything she's reanimating is going to work very well with Delny. The 99 is going to work perfectly with Delny. And there's probably going to be other commanders too that are just randomly power 2 or less that, you know, its triggered ability is so powerful that Delny is going to make sense in the 99 just to double up on those triggered abilities. So wherever Delny can apply, she's going to be the best card in the 99. And despite being mono white, which is very restrictive, I think she can meet also a very powerful commander too. So Delny is very exciting to me. Who doesn't want a roaming throne in the command zone? Despite the restrictions and everything of power 2 or less and also being only monocolor, I'm very excited to brew around her. As she's on the top of the will brew pile, I'm very excited to see just how powerful she can be in the command zone. Next, we've got Discana, the Rage Mother. This is a 5-mana Naya legendary creature bear. It's a 5/5, and when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each creature you control with base power and toughness 2/2. And whenever a creature you control with base power and toughness 2/2 attacks, it gets +3/+3 until end of turn. So this is really nice for your 2/2 creatures, like your bears, obviously. It could be a bear commander. There's not a lot of extra bears that you get in white and red, so like there's stiff competition with a Eula. I still think a Eula is better. But nonetheless, if you want just more color support for your bear deck, this can be done pretty easily. If you're focusing on like just 2/2 hate bears, for example, not literal bears, but rather hate bears, this could be a really fun commander for that too. Card draw and an override effect is just really nice. If you're going for like a face down commander and you want it to be Naya colors and you didn't like cost for some reason, then you could run Discana instead too. There's a lot of utilization with Discana that's exciting. I think the most notable exciting thing to me for Discana is you can build Discana and then build like a dedicated wild pair deck around her where just all your creatures are 2/2s and you just want to tutor up and slam down wild pair. And then whenever you cast a 2/2 creature, you get to tutor up any other creature from your library and put it directly onto the battlefield. That's really exciting to me. Discana is a really great home for that. So yeah, there's a lot of different ways you can build her. I think there's a heavy amount of brew potential around Discana, but I personally still have to find a archetype or way of building around her that really resonates to me. Obviously, I'm going to be adding Wild Pair. I think Hate Bears resonates the most around me too, but until I figure that out, she's in the Might Brew category instead of being the Will Brew category. And at the same time, now I will also shove down Amzu to the Might Brew category as well. You know, Will Brew is a big dedication there, you know, like there's only so many decks I can actually brew around before the next set comes out and the next hype train leaves the station, right? So Might Brew is very respectable. Will Brew is like highly lauded, and then Goat is going to be obviously 1 in a million, basically, right? Next, we've got Emissary Green. This is a 5-mana mono green legendary creature, human advisor. It's a 3/3, and when it attacks, starting with you, each player votes for profit or security. You create a number of treasure tokens equal to twice the number of profit votes, and you put a number of +1/+1 counters on each creature you control equal to the number of security votes. So Emissary Green actually packs a ton of value on an attack trigger. This is really exciting. Like, let's say you're like a go wide, I don't know, Saproling deck, anything that puts a bunch of creatures on the battlefield. Typically, you're going to want to choose to add a bunch of counters onto your creatures, right? And your opponents will not. So they're going to give you a bunch of treasure. Or the opposite happens, right? Like you have only a couple creatures on the battlefield, and then you want some treasures. So you vote for treasures, you're gonna get minimum 2 treasures, and your opponents are gonna deny you treasures, obviously, and they're just gonna pump up Emissary Green and your other handful of creatures instead too. But either way, that's a lot of value. That's a lot of value for an attack trigger. Yeah, it's a 5-drop, it's on the high end, but it is a really great vote card. One of the best vote cards in my opinion. However, I don't think Emissary Green is where you want to be in the command zone at the very least. Like, he wants to be go wide, but he doesn't offer any additional creatures onto your side of the battlefield. You're stuck to mono green, so if you want to make like a vote deck or something, you're very limited in terms of card pool. I do think, though, that Emissary Green is going to be a fantastic addition to the vote deck. And I'm not talking about Tivit. I'm very bored of Tivit. It's not a vote deck. It's a Tivit deck that happens to run vote cards. I really like the Simic Elf Commander that kind of randomly showed up in the Lord of the Rings precon. I would take that one and put Emissary Green in that one, and that really is exciting to me. But as a commander, not so much. As part of the 99, though, very exciting. So Emissary Green, I'm gonna put you in the mech category, not because you're a bad card or anything, just because it's not a great commander in my opinion. Next, we've got Etrata Deadly Fugitive. This is a 3-mana Dimir legendary creature vampire assassin. It's a 1/4 with death touch, and face down creatures you control have 4 mana, 2, a blue, and a black. Turn this creature face up. If you can't, exile it, then you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. And whenever an assassin you control deals combat damage to an opponent, cloak the top card of that player's library. So this is an Assassin Matters commander that also deals with Theft Matters. So a nice little combination there. Is it good? I think it's pretty good. It's a 1/4 with death touch, so it can easily trade up. Your opponents don't necessarily want to be blocking Etrata by herself. Its combat trigger is going to be generating card advantage. You can cast those spells sometimes at a discount too. It's 4 mana to flip the creature up, or if it's a spell, 4 mana just to cast it whenever you want to as well. That's really exciting, and it also opens up the doors for like an Assassin's deck. So we've had Ramsey's Overdark, which is like a very lethal take on Assassins, but this one is a grindier version of Assassins, and I actually like it a lot more than Ramsey's too. Ramsey's is basically an all or nothing commander where people are deadly terrified of you just one-shotting one of them and then winning the game, because that's kind of what Ramsey's Overdark is all about. Whereas this one is a lot less scary in the command zone. Like, yeah, you could have Ramsey's in the 99 and bust it out to steal some victories, but this one is much more chill. Like, you're just stealing a couple cards every once in a while. But yeah, I do like it a lot. It's a 3-drop, so it's very reliable. And it's a unique twist on adding assassins as mattering, and that's cool. I like it. So I like me and Etrata. I'm gonna put it in the Wilbrew territory. Yeah, if I need to go for a Dimir commander, I think this is the one from this set. I like assassins. It's a pretty underutilized archetype, and I've almost never played a theft deck, so I think it's about time to do so. All right, next up we've got Ezrim Agency Chief. This is a 5-mana Azorius legendary creature Archon Detective. It's a 5/5 flyer, and it says when it enters the battlefield, investigate twice, and you can pay 1, sacrifice an artifact. Ezrim gains your choice of Vigilance, Hexproof, or Lifelink until end of turn. Now this looks like a Voltron commander to me, honestly. Like the blink potential of this is okay. Every single time you blink it, you get to investigate twice. That's not so bad, but it's a 5-drop. And honestly, if you want to go like Azorius Voltron, there's just better options than Ezreal. I don't really know if there's anything else super exciting to do with Ezreal outside of that. Maybe you put it in a detective deck or anything. But yeah, this is like one of those cards that is going to be unbeatable if you come across it in limited. But outside of that, nah, I'm not sold on it. We're gonna put Ezreal in the mech category. There's just not that much I'm excited about with it. Next we have Feather Radiant Arbiter. This is a 3-mana Boros legendary creature angel. It's a 4/3 with flying, lifelink, and whenever you cast a non-creature spell that targets only Feather, you may choose any number of other creatures that spell could target and pay 2 for each of those creatures. If you do, for each of those creatures, copy that spell. The copy targets that creature. So the new Feather is basically a nerf version of the original Feather, which was basically just working with like mostly instants and sorceries and letting you reuse them ad nauseum. Like you just cast a spell that targets Feather and something else, or targets one of your creatures and something else. Repeatable removal, for example, or repeatable protection, or repeatable incremental card draw and cantrip or something like that. And you just cast that throughout the entire game and grind out the table. I was not a fan of original Feather at all in terms of playstyle. This one is much the same, but just a lot weaker, honestly. Like the body's better, right? It's a 4/3 flyer lifelink for 3 mana. That's pretty relevant. That's pretty darn good. But then you have to pay 2 mana each time you're casting something targeting Feather. The cute thing though is it's not just stuck to just instants and sorceries this time. You can actually use this to copy auras, for example. So one cool way of actually building new Feather that was pointed out to me is you can go Voltron Feather, but you can do it with like the vows and impetus cycles. So you can pump up Feather with like your own impetuses and stuff, like give her indestructible with the new impetus or whatever like that. And then you can also permanently goad your opponents at the same time. You pump up your opponent's creatures and goad them and all that stuff, and make it so they cannot attack you ever. And that's a cool way of like doubling the value out of your Voltron pieces and forcing your opponents to do half the dirty work for you. I really like that strategy a lot. Is it as powerful as original Feather? No, but I always thought the original Feather was one of those commanders that were really cool in concept and really cool in paper, but absolutely a nightmare and very boring to actually see it played. So while I hated the old Feather, I actually do like the new Feather, and I think Feather Voltron with a specific focus on the impetus cycle is really exciting. And I know most people have written off the new Feather already, which makes it even more interesting for me to actually brew around it. So in terms of brew potential, I'm gonna put this at number 2. Like Delny, I'm very excited for, and then the one I'm most excited for afterwards is Feather, just because it's a refreshing take on Voltron, and so many people are already writing her off that it's exciting to me to actually just try it out myself. Next, we've got Headliner Scarlet. This is a 4-mana mono red legendary creature human warlock. It's a 3/3 with haste, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures targeted player controls can't block this turn, so just mass evasion for your turn. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down. You may look at and play that card this turn. So Headliner Scarlet is a great way to push damage through the moment you cast her, which is really nice. She has haste, so she adds 3 damage to that attack too. And it could be relevant for certain commanders that care about haste. I believe there's 2 of them, like one in Gruul, it's a new Samut, and the one in the one was from Capenna that I think makes like treasures when you're attacking Ognis. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, exile the top card of your library face down and you may play it. So that's just incremental impulse draw for whatever deck that you end up running Scarlet in. It could potentially be decent in like Prosper, for example. Like it could be incremental card draw early on, and then later on, if you have an army with Prosper or whatever, or Faldorn. Faldorn's another great one. If you have an army of those, you can play Scarlet later on and then just swing for lethal that way. So there's some flexibility there, but notably, that's all in the 99. As the commander, I'm just not seeing it. Like, yeah, she's all right, but she doesn't offer as much in the command zone without having those other colors to support her better. And I think if you want to be in mono red, like the commander has to do something so powerful to really justify not having other accesses to colors. And I don't think Headliner Scarlet's good enough to justify that. I think she's great in the 99 of like Faldorn, of Samhain, of Ognis, maybe Prosper players too, but in the command zone, not so much. So I'm going to put her in the mech category, but like the high mech category, you know? Next up, we have Izoni, Center of the Web. This is a 6-mana Golgari legendary creature elf detective. It has menace, and whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may collect evidence 4. If you do, creates 2/2/1 black and green spider creature tokens with menace and reach, and you can sacrifice 4 tokens, surveil 2, then draw 2 cards. You gain 2 life, and it's a 5/4. This one is kind of interesting. I immediately wrote it off when I first read the card, like, ugh, you want to collect evidence, that's already bad, and the payoff is you make 2 2/1s, that's not great, and oh, you have to sacrifice 4 tokens, that's pretty bad. But like, the overall package is not that bad. You know what? Sacrificing 4 tokens, if they're like clue tokens or whatever, to surveil 2 and draw 2 cards is good. It's not a bad rate. You know what? It's pretty mana efficient. So in the right shell, I think Izoni could be kind of decent. It obviously makes spiders, so like if you're in a spider deck, you don't really have that many options. Izoni is going to be great in the 99 there. But then the question is like, what decks can actually support so many tokens that her sacrifice ability is going to be worthwhile? And the answer is, I don't know. Like, if you're in a Golgari deck that can generate a ton of tokens and most of them are useless, then she's great. She can convert them into card draw and self-mill and gain life. That's all well and good. But it really depends on the right shell, and it is a big ask. Like, sacrificing 4 tokens is a big activation cost. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think she's good enough in the command zone because you need some serious token generators in the 99 for her to be good. But if you find a commander that really works and meshes with her ability, obviously if you're in a spider deck, she's going to be an auto include. Like, spiders are going to take what they can get, but yeah. As a commander, not so much. Not feeling it. All right, Izoni, you're going in the mech category. All right, next we've got Judith, Carnage Connoisseur. This is a 5-mana Rakdos legendary creature human shaman. It's a 3/4, and whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, choose one. That spell gains Death Touch and Lifelink, or create a 2/2 red imp creature token with when this creature dies, it deals 2 damage to each opponent. So Judith turns all your pinging abilities, your one-sided pinging abilities, your electrolyzes and whatever, into just a mass board wipe for your opponent's creatures, which is hilarious. You know, like just End the Festivities or whatever, a 1-mana red spell that just deals 1 damage to all your opponent's creatures in their faces. Well, giving it Death Touch and Lifelink is going to be busted with Judith, and well worth the 5-mana cost of her being in the command zone. Definitely a build around, and the fact that she can also make imp tokens whenever you don't have like a mass board wipe that's relevant or anything like that is also really good. And then the fact that like when they die, it deals even more damage. Like, that's all good. That's, I think, worth 5 mana, and it's also worth building around in the command zone. That said, does that speak to me personally? Not so much. Like, I kind of don't like Judith in a way, because she basically points a gun at the board state, where if your opponents see that you're playing Judith, they kind of know that if Judith's on the table, if they're a creature deck, they're just not going to be able to play the game. So that means every single removal spell is going to be kept ready for Judith to kill her as quickly as possible, which means your deck is not going to be working that much. So while I do think she is a good commander, I don't think she actually plays that well, or it doesn't play in the style that I actually like. Just being able to murder the rest of the table at any given chance is just, I don't know. It's a weird dynamic, and I feel like it might end up costing you games more than it ends up helping you, because it's just politically, you become the #1 target at the table. So I don't know. I think she's very good. She's very exciting to build around, but at the same time, I don't think I would actually ever play her because of just like the arch enemy status you're going to be getting by holding a gun to the table. So she's in the Might Brew category. She is a really strong commander. She is a good build around, but for me personally, I'm not that excited for her. Next we have cost Eyes of the Glade. This is a legendary creature, Dry Detective. It's a 2-mana Naya creature, so access to 3 colors for just 2 mana. It's a 2/2, and whenever a creature you control that was turned face up this turn deals combat damage to a player, draw a card, and you can tap it, turn target face down, attacking creature you control face up. So cost is basically the next face down matters commander. It cares about, you know, morph, it cares about manifest, it cares about disguise, anything that's face down, it wants to flip it right side up and have a fun time with it. Before this, there was only one official face down commander, and that was Kadena. And the parallels are very obvious here. Both of them give you access to 3 colors for your face down archetype. Kadena's Sultai cost is Naya, so they share green together. Cost costs less mana. Kadena costs more mana. And they both generate mana advantage. But in 2 different ways. Kadena generates a mana advantage by letting you cast the morph cards for 0 mana instead of 3, so it saves you 3 mana each time you utilize it, whereas cost saves you mana on flipping the card face up, so that can save you anywhere between 1 to, I don't know, like 7 mana. I don't know how much Cloud Scraper, Crows and Cloud Scraper is, but I think that's the highest one. So they both save you mana in different ways, and they both draw you cards different ways. Kadena draws you cards when they're entering the battlefield, whereas cost draws you cards when they're dealing combat damage for the first time when they're turned face up. So just different ways. Cost is a little bit more restrictive or more hoopy to get your mana advantage and draw your cards, whereas Kadena is much easier to immediately get it. But costs less mana, costs 2 mana instead of 4, which is very relevant in a deck, in an archetype that is so focused on having your commander on the battlefield, right? So they both have their pros and cons. I think they're about equal in terms of their power level. I think costs less, which is very relevant, but you know, has to work a little bit harder to get the value, whereas Kadena costs more mana, but once she's on the battlefield and you're sitting pretty, you can generate value a little bit more consistently and easily. Cost is the also, how the decks play out is very different. Cost is very much aggro, right? You want to be attacking. You want to deal damage to your opponents. You want to be attacking so you can flip them face up. You really want extra combats because then you can untap cost and reuse its ability and draw more cards and all that stuff. So it's very much like the extra combat in your face version of the archetype, whereas Kadena is the sit back and chill control version of the archetype. You don't want to be attacking. You want to be sitting with all your mana untapped. You want to be flashing in your creatures to draw more cards, and you want to control the table until eventually you either combo out or drop an overrun or something like that. So very different styles of play, but nonetheless, I think both of them are super fun. I personally like cost even more than Kadena, and I am a big fan of Kadena as well too, but I just like aggro more than sitting back and having control. That's my personal shtick. So cost is just really, really cool. Now, I really like cost. I will definitely brew around him. He already comes in a pre-con, so he's already kind of pre-brewed, but I am very interested to give my own take on him and at least do like a pre-con upgrade guide for the deck too. I love face down as an archetype. I love Kadena. I had an Animar Morphs deck before Kadena was even printed, so I'm very familiar with Temur Morph, and I'm very excited to see how Naya Morph plays out too. It seems really fun. Next we have Kellen, Inquisitive Prodigy. This is a 4-mana Simic legendary creature human fairy detective, and it comes with an adventure side. So the adventure side is Tail the Suspect. It's a sorcery, and it says investigate. You may play an additional land this turn. And then the creature side is legendary creature human fairy detective. It has flying, vigilance. It's a 3/4, and whenever it attacks, destroy up to 1 target artifact. If you control that permanent, draw a card. Kellen's pretty interesting in the command zone because it basically guarantees that you're going to have a really good turn 2, and then you could play him on turn 3 and start attacking or drawing, like to draw cards or blow up artifacts. He's also pretty good in the 99 as well too. Like, he's repeatable artifact removal. He has vigilance, and he has flying, so he has evasion to repeatedly do that. If you have a bunch of clues laying around or food or whatever, you could turn them into card draw instead too. You don't have to blow stuff up. The flexibility is really nice here, and honestly, he's not that bad as a commander. He's not interesting to me as a commander. That's the main problem. But having a commander that's just like, yeah, we've got your turn 2 play. You can play an extra lane this turn, and then turn 3 you could already play a 4-drop like Kellen. That's really good in the command zone, honestly. I like that a lot. I just think that he's boring. That's my problem, is he's kind of boring. He's not a commander I'm like, gee Williker, I want to build around him, you know? Like, his abilities are fine. But yeah, not interesting to me. But I really like the curve. The curve is very cool. But interesting? No, not so much. So do I want to brew around him? No, not so much, but I might. You know what? I might. I really like the curve on it. Maybe you can build like an interesting Simic Clues Matter commander and you don't want to play Lonus for some reason. Actually, never mind. I'm taking it all back. He goes back to the mech category. No, there's no way. Like if I want to go Simic Clues, for example, I'm obviously picking a Lonus, right? Yeah, let's be real. All right, now we get the third Krenko, I believe. This is Krenko, Baron of Tin Street. This is a 3-mana red legendary creature goblin. It's a 3/3 with haste. You can tap it, sacrifice an artifact, put a +1/+1 counter on each goblin you control, and whenever an artifact is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 1 red. If you do, create a goblin, and it gains haste until end of turn. And the cute thing about this artifact thing is actually, not only does it trigger off Krenko's ability and your own abilities, that's all well and good. However, if you're like, have your opponents have like treasures or whatever, and you have red mana to spare, you could benefit from them sacrificing artifacts by making a bunch of goblins. That's actually very cute. This Krenko is actually a pretty sweet goblin commander. The way I envision this commander actually working is not so much being like an artifact deck and a goblin deck, but rather just a goblin deck that happens to run a higher amount of artifact hate, because we can just blow up our opponent's artifacts and that's fine, you know? And we'll run like a couple artifacts, enough to activate Krenko, because that +1/+1 counter thing is really, really good. But like, just like using like a liquid metal torque or whatever, turning your opponent's stuff into artifacts, blowing them up and making goblins out of it is kind of funny to me. I don't know. It's kind of cute. Is it as good as the other 2 Krenkos? No, it requires a lot more work. But it is a cute spin on goblins. You know what? It's a little bit different. It's goblins. It's always goblins. It's mono red goblins, same as it always was. But, you know, it's a little bit of artifact destruction. That's cute, right? You know what? I might brew Krenko. I might brew him. Like, obviously, he's not the best Krenko. He's the weakest of the bunch. But if I wanted to build a goblin deck, you know what? Maybe I'll try something a little bit different. Next, we've got Karlov's Visionary Inventor. This is a 7-mana Izzet legendary creature Viashino Artificer. It's a 4/4 menace, ward 2, and haste. And whenever it attacks, sacrifice any number of other creatures, then exile the top X cards of your library, where X is their total power. You may cast any number of instant and/or sorcery spells from among the exiled cards without paying their mana cost. This is a really nice payoff for a go wide Izzet Spellslinger deck. You know what? It's actually pretty darn cool. You don't actually have to run that many creatures. There are a lot of Spellslinger creatures that generate a lot of tokens when you're casting instants or sorceries. So you run all of those essentially, and then you cast Kylox whenever you're ready, and you swing in there, you sacrifice a bunch of creatures, and you pop off, and that's actually kind of fine. It is 7 mana, which is ouchies, but I think the idea of Kylox is that the turn you cast him is basically the turn you kind of pop off and win the game, right? He has haste, he has ward 2, so he's a little bit harder to kill, and then you need to have basically a bunch of creatures already on the board before you cast Kylox. You swing in there, and then you get to cast a bunch of spells for free. So it's card advantage and mana advantage. And you know what? I actually like this quite a bit. It's pretty cute. It already works well with a lot of what Izzet Spellslinger is trying to do, and it's a little bit different, you know? So I actually like this one quite a bit, and it does tickle my fancies, let's say that. Who the heck says tickles my fancies? Anyway, I'm gonna put it in the Will Brew section. This one's really cool. I think I'd put it over Etrata too. We're kind of filling up pretty heavy on the Will Brew section, I'm not gonna lie, but yeah, some of these are legit exciting. All right, next up we have Lavinia Foil 2 Conspiracy. This is another clue commander. It's a 3-mana Azorius legendary creature human detective. It's a 2/3 vigilance. Almost all of these have vigilance for some reason. Whenever you cast your second spell each turn, investigate, and you can tap it, add 2 colorless mana, activate only during an opponent's turn. So this is a very efficient investigator, you know, casting 2 spells each turn isn't too hard if you're running like all the cheap cantripy stuff like ops and whatnot, brainstorms and whatnot. And then she generates clues and she basically taps to sack a clue, activate a clue, draw a card. Not that bad, not that exciting, honestly. If you have better things you can do with Lavinia's tap ability, then it would be more exciting, especially if it didn't have like activate only on opponent's turn. If you could activate it on your turn, then you could like pay for equip costs and stuff like that. But doing it on your opponent's turn usually means you're activating clues and whatever. I mean, who cares? But yeah, I don't know. It's really efficient, but I'm not really excited for it. I don't know. This is pretty meh to me. It's fine in the 99, but not as a commander. Next, we have Lazav, Wearer of Faces. This is a 2-mana Dimir legendary creature shapeshifter detective. It's a 2/3, and when it attacks, exile target card from a graveyard, then investigate, and whenever you sacrifice a clue, you may have Lazav become a copy of a creature card, exile with it until end of turn. So Lazav is like the older Lazav, except just kind of worse, you know, like instead of easily popping off with like a haste enabler in the graveyard and then a pump effect and then turn it into an effect creature and one-shot kill people with that. This one's more chill, like you have to sacrifice clues and it's a little bit harder to do all those things. It doesn't end up with hexproof or anything inherently. So yeah, it's fine. It's not super exciting to me, but it's fine. It's in the mech category. I'm not that excited for it, to be honest. Next, we've got Lonus Genetics Expert. This is a 3-mana Simic legendary creature snake elf detective. It's a 1/2 with Evolve, and whenever one or more +1/+1 counters are put on Lonus, investigate that many times. Whenever you sacrifice a clue, put a +1/+1 counter on another target creature you control. So new Lonus is a more fair version of original Lonus. It plays very differently. Like this one is not about having a ton of creatures entering the battlefield and making clues that way. This one is 3 mana and it cares more about +1/+1 counters and stuff like that. So it is quite different. It's like a clues meets +1/+1 counters and put them together. I know this Lonus has some combos associated with her. There's at least one combo that I'm aware of that I'm going to be putting on the screen because I don't remember the card name. But yeah, it's fine. I don't know. It's fine. I'm not super excited about this one. It's like it's another Lonus, but just not as good. So whatever. That's another meh for me, folks. Next, we've got Marvo Deep Operative. This is a 5-mana Dimir legendary creature, Octopus Rogue, love it. It's a 1/8, also love it. And whenever it attacks, clash with the defending player. This is an old school mechanic from Lorwyn that nobody liked, but it's brought back and I love it too. Whenever you win a clash, draw a card, then you may cast a spell from your hand with mana value 8 or less without paying its mana cost. I love everything about this. It runs on a very terrible mechanic that's highly limited, that you only have a couple cards to work with, actually. You can even see them over here, cards of Clash. These are all the cards of Clash. There's 29 of them. There's even less of those to play with in a Dimir deck, obviously, if this is your commander. And the only 2 that are any good for Marvel are these 2. Research the Deep and Revive the Falling. And not because they do anything, it's because they're the cheapest ones available. They're just 2 mana, and if you win the clash, you get to return to your hand and do it again. And the whole point with Marvo is not the clash cards themselves, it's the fact that Marvo's triggered ability is so freaking strong. So you get to draw a card, but then most importantly, you get to just cast a spell for free. So you load up with like high cost spells, like 7 drops and 8 drops or whatever like that, and you get to cheat them into play with Marvo by playing your horrible clash cards. So the name of the game here is basically like give Marvo haste and evasion and protection. Find and cast your 2 or 3 playable clash cards, fill up the rest of the deck with like top deck manipulation and stuff to make sure that you win the clash, and then cast your your silly spells for free. It's a lot of setup. It's definitely not a good deck, but sometimes it's gonna look glorious. But the main thing that I like about this deck is that Marvo is an octopus rogue. It has an 8 toughness, it clashes, it casts an 8 mana spell. It's just silly, you know? Sometimes silly is the best type of awesome. So Marvo, I love it. I'm gonna brew it. I'm gonna put it in the will brew section. The will brew section is getting pretty tight, so I'm sorry, Trata. I found the Dimir commander I actually love more, so I'm gonna put her in the might brew section. I think like 6 will brews is already a lot. Next up, we've got Massacre Girl, Known Killer. This is a 4-mana black legendary creature, human assassin. It has menace, and creatures you control have wither. So they deal damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters, and whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, if its toughness was less than 1, draw a card. So Massacre Girl is very cute with like the previous Massacre Girl to draw a ton of cards. Toxic Deluge draws a ton of cards. If you have any ways of like forcing blocks with your creatures, and then, you know, killing them with Wither, that can draw you lots of cards. So she draws lots of cards, but she requires your opponent's creatures all dying. She's kind of like Tashiro, except instead of like focusing on instant sorceries, you're just focusing on whittling opponent's toughness to less than 1. It's cute, it's very unique, but as a commander, it's really good at killing your opponent's creatures. It's cute also with like Forbidden Orchard, for example. You can give them 1/1s to kill those creatures afterwards to draw more cards. But this also has kind of a target on your head because obviously if Massacre Girl is your commander, you're going to be focusing on killing your opponent's creatures again. It's kind of like the Judith issue. I like her in the 99 of maybe some decks, you know? I don't know which ones, but maybe some. But as a commander, it just doesn't really excite me. So Massacre Girl, you're going to be a meh, but like a high meh because it draws cards, and drawing cards is fun. All right, speaking of card draw, we have Mastermind Plum. This is a 3-mana black legendary creature human wizard. It's a 2/2, and whenever it attacks, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard. If an artifact card was exiled this way, you create a treasure token, and whenever you cast a spell, if mana from a treasure was spent to cast it, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. So the main thing here is the cast a spell from treasure thingy. Drawing cards is really nice, especially if you're in a treasure deck. The attack trigger is fine, but it's like a 2/2, so you have to give it evasion first, and then your opponents have to have artifacts in the graveyard, or at least you have to have artifacts in the graveyard. So there's a little bit more hoops to actually generate treasures off this thing. But if you do have treasures, then suddenly you're going to be drawing a bunch of cards. So this makes Mastermind Plum, I don't think, a very good commander, but he is fantastic in, let's say, a Prosper deck, or any deck that cares about treasures in black. If you make a lot of treasures, then turning that treasure into not just mana, but also card draw is very powerful. And that's a lot of value for a 3-drop, just not in the command zone, just more of the 99. So Mr. Plum, you're going to go in the mech category. Great in the 99, just not in the command zone. Next, we've got Melik Reforged Researcher. This is a 5-mana Izzet legendary creature, Weird Detective. And let me just say, weirds are one of my favorite creature types, and I love seeing them. So a Weird Detective, that's just cool. And it has a power and toughness equal to twice the number of instant and sorcery cards in your graveyard, and the first instant or sorcery spell you cast each turn costs 3 less to cast. So Melik is actually a very big mana discount for your Spell Slinger deck. The only downside is it's a 5-drop. So it's a 5-drop that starts ramping you, which is not ideal. However, if you have really expensive spells with colorless requirements or X spells, yeah, that's pretty sweet. If you're like an instant speed style deck, then yeah, you get a lot of value out of Melik, but it's very specific what type of deck you're going to be running around it, and it is a 5-drop, so I don't know. I like Kylox a lot more than this, but this might show up in some deck, but it is cute. So Kylox, I'm sorry, but you're in the mech category. Next, we've got Mirko, Obsessive Theorist. This is a 3-mana Dimir legendary creature, Vampire Detective. It's a 1/3 with flying, vigilance, and whenever you surveil, put a +1/+1 counter on Mirko, and then at the beginning of your end step, you may return a target creature card with power less than Mirko's from your graveyard to the battlefield with a finality counter on it. Mirko I really like because it's a self-mill graveyard reanimator deck with some really cool twists. The first twist is that it cares about Surveil, which is like a first, honestly. There's not really a lot of commanders that actually care about surveil. This is like the only one that I can think of off the top of my head. It grows Mirko. It's not a huge deal, but it is cute that, you know, it cares about surveil a little bit. And then it reanimates, but it doesn't just reanimate, it reanimates with a finality counter on it. So there's a couple ways of removing the finality counter on it. You could like blink the creature, exiling it, and then returning it to the battlefield. So it's now doesn't have a finality counter on it. You can remove the counter with stuff like Hex Parasite, but my favorite is moving the finality counter from your creature to your opponent's creatures, so when those creatures die, they're exiled forever and yours can go back to the graveyard. So stuff like Nesting Grounds is a great way of removing finality counters and moving it over to your opponent's creatures to just turn the finality counter from a downside to an upside. So that's all really well and good. Also, the nice thing about Mirko too is that while you could focus on creatures that have low power to match Mirko's ability more easily, you could just pump up Mirko's power very easily with cards like Blackblade for Forge. You don't actually have to be surveilling constantly. You could just use like a single card to pump up Mirko to like 9 or even higher power, and then reanimate whatever the heck you feel like doing. So that's a lot of value for a 3-drop. It's a really fantastic face commander for one of the precons, and yeah, I'm excited for it, legitimately. So Mirko's very good, very well costed. I really like the precon a whole bunch. I'm definitely going to brew around it. I'm going to be upgrading the precon deck, so yeah, I'm going to get around to brewing this one as well. Next up, we've got Morska Undersea Sleuth. This is another precon face commander, and spoiler alert, this is the only one that I don't like. It's a 3-mana Bant legendary creature Vidalcan Fish Detective. It's not a merfolk, it's a Vidalcan Fish Detective, which makes it way cooler. Sorry, Brian. It's a 2/3, and it says you have no maximum hand size. At the beginning of your upkeep, investigate, and whenever you draw your second card each turn, put 2+1/+1 counters on Morska. So the nice thing about Morska, I'm going to say something nice about it. It's a 3-drop. It gives you access to 3 colors, and it does a couple really minorly good things that's very consistent. No maximum hand size, upkeep, investigate, and then grows slowly but steadily when you're drawing cards. Like, those are all great, but they're all very boring. It's very consistent, it's low mana, it's very reliable, but it's boring. So I don't really like this face commander. I like other commanders instead, but I do like that it opens up 3-color clues, but also more importantly, like 3-color draw matters. Your second card each turn draw matters. Like, there's a bunch of cards out there, like Min, for example, and Jolriel, which all have this sort of clause to them, and you could run them all separately as commanders, or you could put them all together in the same deck with Morska. I really like that. I think the face commander is bland, but whatever. I do like the creature type though, that's cute. Will I brew around Morska? Well, it is the precon, right? But no, I'm actually not going to be brewing around Morska. I'm going to be using the secondary commander for that precon to upgrade it. Next, we have the face commander for the last precon, Nelly Borka Impulsive Accuser. This is a 4-mana Boros legendary creature human detective. It's a 2/4 with vigilance, and whenever it attacks, suspect target creature, then goad all suspected creatures. And whenever one or more creatures an opponent controls deals combat damage to one or more of your opponents, you and the controller of those creatures each draw a card. And I love this commander. It does 2 different things to kind of force your opponents to attack each other. One is the most direct way of doing it, like a hard force with the goad effect, where they must attack somebody else other than you. But then the secondary ability, I would suggest, is even stronger than goad, and that is like a soft incentive to have your opponents attack each other, where you're kind of tempting them with card draw. And who will deny card draw? The Edric effect, if you will. Your opponent gets to draw a card, you get to draw a card, everybody wins, but you win more because your opponents are now taking damage, not you, and it could have been an attack that would have went on you if you had not given them a card as incentive not to hit you. So I love this ability. It also gets rid of like any of the feel bad situations of like forcing your opponents to be permanently goaded. Even if you don't have a goad effect on the battlefield, your opponents are still going to want to hit each other because they want to be drawing the cards. And guess what? You're going to be drawing cards at the same time. So I love Nelly Borka. I love her as a goad commander. I love that she has 2 abilities that goad your opponents. One is a literal goad effect, but the second one is like a soft goad effect. Works really, really well. It's a 4-drop. I love her to death. She's my favorite of the face commanders. So will I be brewing around Nelly Borka? Absolutely yes. She is a precon, so I'm going to be upgrading her, and I'm going to definitely be keeping her in the command zone. Next up, we have yet another Niv Mizzet card. This is Niv Mizzet Guild Pact. This is a 5 mana, 5 color legendary creature dragon avatar. It's a 6/6. It has flying, hexproof from multicolored, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, it deals X damage to any target. Target player gains X cards, and you gain X life, where X is a number of different color pairs among permanents you control that are exactly 2 colors. So this is Niv-Mizzet number 6. Originally, Niv-Mizzet was the Perun of the Izzet guild, so he was 2 color, and we got 3 of those. And now that he's been elevated to the 5 color embodiment of the guild pack, he's now 5 color and he cares about all the guilds. So all of these iterations, all these 5 color iterations, all care about having color pairs in your deck and having an equal distribution out of all of them. The previous 2 Niv-Mizzets were both very good. I think the Reborn version was the best out of the best just because it generates so much card advantage on an ETB, so it's good generic good stuff. The Jumpstart version was a little bit more interesting, but still very busted. I've been on the receiving end of that commander and it's very, very strong. This one doesn't just care about an equal distribution of 2 color guild cards. You have to be focusing specifically on permanents, and those permanents have to be on the battlefield. So it's not just enough to have an equal distribution of the guild cards in your deck. You have to be focusing on permanents and they have to be on the battlefield, so it's a much larger hoop to jump through than, say, Reborn. And then on top of that, you have to be attacking with Niv-Mizzet, so it only triggers on combat damage. That said though, once you do have a bunch of guild pairings on the battlefield, Niv-Mizzet is actually a really nice payoff. Like, you get to snipe something, you get to draw cards, you get to gain life. That's a lot of value on a combat trigger, and obviously if you have all 10 guilds on the battlefield, that's usually going to be game over for your opponents if you hit once or twice. And this is a cool difference from the last iteration of Niv-Mizzet, which was the Supreme version, which focused on instants and sorceries. So now we're moving from Niv-Mizzet focusing on instants and sorceries, guild pairs of those, to permanents, which is a really cool different way of showcasing the character being the embodiment of the guild pact. So yeah, I really like this iteration of Niv-Mizzet. It's 5 color, it's going to be still very good stuffy, but you do have to work to get your value out of it, and the payoff is very nice. So yeah, I'm a big fan of this Niv-Mizzet, but I'm not quite sure if I love it enough that I will brew it, but it's definitely on the high list of might brew. It's top of the list of the might brew, and if I do get around to brewing everything else in the will brew section, this is the first one I will actually be brewing afterwards. Next up, we've got Rakdos, Patron of Chaos. This is a 6 mana Rakdos legendary creature demon. It's a 6/6 flying trample, and at the beginning of your end step, target opponent may sacrifice 2 non-land, non-token permanents. If they don't, draw 2 cards. Okay, this card is straight up boring. Basically, the most of the text is irrelevant. It's just a 6/6 flying trample that's going to end of turn draw you 2 cards. They're going to choose somebody who doesn't want to be sacrificing permanents. They're going to give you 2 cards, and that's going to be the end of that. It's really unexciting. It's like obviously very good in limited or whatever, maybe playable in certain 1v1 formats, I don't know. But in Commander, there's just not much to really grasp around, not much to build around, and it doesn't excite me in any sort of way. I'll definitely be running it in the 99 of like a demon deck. Like, there's another Rakdos commander that cares about demons, and you know, it's going to be really fun to just add more powerful demons in the 99 of that, and Rakdos, Patron of Chaos definitely ticks that box, but it's just not really exciting as a commander. So this Rakdos is meh. I'm going to put it in the meh category. Next, we've got Senator Peacock. This is a 5 mana mono blue legendary creature human advisor. It's a 3/4, and artifacts you control are clues in addition to their other types, and have pay 2, sacrifice this artifact, draw a card, and whenever you sacrifice a clue, target creature can't be blocked this turn. The gimmick with Senator Peacock is actually kind of cool. If you're an artifact deck, then suddenly you play Senator Peacock and all of them are clues. And there's at least 2 really good payoffs for this. There's a Doctor Who card that acts as a huge mana rock when you have clues on the battlefield. So you plop that onto the battlefield with Senator Peacock and a bunch of artifacts, and you're going to be generating a ton of blue mana. So that's really sweet. And the other payoff is also from the main set, I believe, which is a card that just turns all your clues clues into 5/5s or whatever and smash his face. It's like a kelp creature thingy. So that's two cool ways of making it payoff with Senator Peacock, just playing an artifact deck, having the commander in the command zone, turning everything into clues. That said though, is that enough for me to be excited about this card in Commander? Not really. Like, do I want to run this in a random artifact deck? Not so much, because yeah, turning all my artifacts into clues, it could be powerful when you combine it with other things, but is it really worth trying to find these cards together in the 99 to pull off like a combo that doesn't exactly win you the game? I'm not really convinced on that. And then as a commander, yeah, it's more reliable to, you know, combine the Peacock with the Journal or whatever to make mana, or the Kelp thingy to make a huge army. But like, is that enough to be excited to build a deck around? No. So I think Senator Peacock, it has some interesting potential, it has some cool synergies, but it's not interesting enough for me to actually build a deck around or put her in the 99 up. So the Peacock is also in the mech category. It's not, just doesn't do enough. It is an exciting card, but it just doesn't do enough right now. All right, here's the commander though I really like. This is Sophia, Dogge Detective. This is a 4-mana Bant legendary creature, human detective. It's a 3/4, and when it enters the battlefield, create Tiny, a legendary 2/2 green dog detective creature token with trample. You can pay 1, sacrifice an artifact token, put a +1/+1 counter on each dog you control, and whenever a dog you control deals combat damage to a player, create a food token, then investigate. So you're creating a food token and you're creating a clue token. I don't know why investigate has its own mechanic to make a clue. It should just say like create a food token to create a clue token, or like maybe you should like investigate to make clues and cook to make food or something like that. It's just so weird that like clues in general have a specific wording to make clue tokens, whereas nothing else has the equivalent there. I don't know. That's an off-topic rant. The point is though, I think this card is really, really cool. It's a Bant, a dog commander that has an artifact sub-theme built into it. And I think that's just a really cool thing to mix and match together. It offers a blue alternative to the Naya Rin Siri, which is kind of like the de facto dog commander. You could also go Ginny Faye too, which is also Naya. So if you drop red for blue and you add an artifact sub-theme, then you have a new dog commander. And that's really exciting. And also, I just think this commander is very powerful. It's a 4-drop, so it's not super expensive or anything. It comes with a dog. It gives a big payoff for just dealing combat damage with your dogs, and then you can start sacrificing your artifacts to pump up all your dogs and turn them into a finisher. So it provides a strong value engine for your dogs. It comes with a dog, and then it provides a finisher for your dogs all in one card. And it gives you access to 3 different colors of doggos. So they're all good boys, and you get to run 3 colors worth of them in the deck. That's just a lot of value. I think I like this even more than the Rin Siri version of doggos. We'll have to see. But yeah, overall, really, really good. Now, Sophia actually comes with the Bant Clue Precon deck. She is the lieutenant. She's like the secondary commander for the deck. And I like her a lot more than the Vidalkin. So that one's kind of boring. This one's more exciting. Obviously, it's not a better face commander for the deck because it focuses on dogs and there's not really any dog support in the Precon. However, I think it's much more exciting to upgrade the deck into a doggo deck and then have her as the commander rather than the not merfolk commander, Morska? I forgot her name already. Whatever. Anyway, that's a cool one. It's Wilbrew because I'm going to be upgrading the Precon. Next, we've got Tessak Judas Hellhound. This is a mono red dog support piece. So it doesn't fit with Sophia. It's in red, not in blue. But it works with like Ginny Faye or Rin Siri or whatever, the other doggos. So it's a legendary creature, elemental dog. It's a 3/3 with Unleash. Other dogs you control have Unleash. Creatures you control with counters on them have haste, and whenever it attacks, add red for each attacking creature. So it gives all your doggos haste. Basically, you get to unleash them. They get bigger. They can't block, but they do get bigger very mana efficiently. And then they immediately have haste. And then Tessak adds red when it is attacking. The mana that it generates is a little bit clunky because it doesn't last until your end step or until your next main phase. So you really have to use it in that attack phase or else the mana is wasted. And there's not really that many outlets to pump them up in dogs, I don't think. And correct me if I'm wrong. I thought maybe you could do like infinite combats with aggravated assault, but aggravated assault has to be activated on your main phase on like sorcery speed, so you can't spend that with Tessak. So let me know what you're gonna be doing with that. I'm sure there's like a fire breathing effect that you can pair with this to pump up your doggos when you're attacking or something like that. Some sort of utility with it, but let me know what the best one is with Tessak. Obviously, Tessak is a really great card in the 99 of dog decks, but as a mono red commander, not so much. It's just you really need more colors to build a full dog deck, so it has to be in the Met tier. It's great in the 99 of dog decks, but obviously just not a great commander. Next, we've got another Teysa. This is Teysa Opulent Oligarch. This is a 3-mana Orzhov legendary creature human advisor. It's a 2/3 with Death Touch, and at the beginning of your end step, investigate for each opponent who lost life this turn. Whenever a clue you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, create a 1/1 white and black spirit creature token with flying. This ability triggers only once each turn. Now this Teysa actually kind of slaps. It's really easy to have all your opponents lose at least 1 life each turn. Like you just pair her with an extort card, for example, and then trigger extort a single time on your turn, and then bam, everybody's has lost a life. You don't have to attack, you don't have to do anything fancy with it. And then you get to investigate for every single opponent. So in a 4-player free-for-all game, you have 3 opponents. You're going to be investigating 3 times on a 3-drop for very minimal effort, for very little hoops to jump through. That's actually really good. And then when you're cracking your clues, you can do 1 per turn cycle. You can make a spirit. So you can make a spirit for every single person's turn if you have enough mana and you're cracking enough clues, or you're sacrificing clues for whatever. So in a 4-player game, again, you're making 4 spirits per turn cycle. That's the cap with Teysa, and that's a pretty reasonable cap too. It's not too difficult to be sacrificing your clues for, you know, drawing cards on its own activated ability, or sacrificing them for other stuff as well too. And then you just have a bunch of spirits. You have a bunch of clues, you're drawing a bunch of cards, you have a bunch of spirits. They themselves have flying, so they can be attacking on your turn, making your opponents lose life, and then generating more clues that way. So she poops out a lot of tokens. All for a 3-drop. That's a fantastic engine in your command zone to really build around. So obviously she works very well with like any of the token doublers or token chipplers, and you can really flood the board very, very efficiently with her. That's a lot of value for a 3-drop. That's definitely something I'm really excited to brew around. So I'm going to be putting Teysa in the Will Brew category. The Will Brew category is getting very, very bloated at this point, so I'm going to have to start moving some stuff to the bottom. Maybe we'll put Anzrag. Maybe we'll put Anzrag in the Might Brew category. How about that? I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a little bit overly ambitious with the Will Brew category. So Anzrag goes down. Do we cut anything else? Do we cut anything else? I don't know. The precons we have to be doing. So there's 4 of them that are must be brewed. But yeah. Ooh, let's see how many I actually do. All right, friends, we finally get to the pinnacle of commander design. This is the Pride of Hullclade. This is an 11 mana green, well, Simic color identity because it has a blue activated ability. It's a legendary creature, Crocodile Elk Turtle. Just let that simmer for a moment. Crocodile Elk Turtle. That's just poetry. It's beautiful. It's a 2/15, so 15, big bajonkadonk. And it costs X less to cast, where X is a total toughness of creatures you control. So you could cast it for just 1 green mana, and it gets around even the command tax too. So if you have like just an infinite number of power, or rather toughness on the board, you can just always cast the Pride for just 1 green mana. It has Defender, so it's not attacking that much. However, it also has an activated ability, 2 and double blue, so 4 mana total. Until end of turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and gains whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player. Draw cards equal to its toughness and can attack as though it didn't have Defender. All right, so Pride of the Hullclade. It itself is going to be attacking as a 215 if you have any way of getting around the defender ability. Its own ability allows it to attack as if it didn't have defender. And then if it deals damage, guess what? You're going to be drawing 15 cards off the Pride if it manages to smash in there. Obviously, a lot of stuff has to be going properly for the Pride to be popping off, but you could be drawing 15 cards a turn or combat with the Pride. That's insane. And it has a huge cost reduction. It deals with defenders. It can make your defenders attack and draw cards off them. It can cost 1 mana to cast, and it's a crocodile elk turtle. It's great. It's awesome. So this, my friends, this one is not a might brew. This one is not a will brew. This one is the GOAT tier. This is the only one so far that I'm going to be putting in the goated tier and actually build a paper version of this deck, which is the highest honor I can bequeath to any of these commanders. And the reason is because I want to build a turtle deck. I'm building a turtle deck for my boyfriend. And it's gonna be garbage. If you've seen Commander Clash fairly recently, we were building each other troll decks, and I built Richard a turtle deck. It was Sultai, it was Karlov, I believe, as the commander, and it was running a bunch of stuff to like make card advantage happen and everything like that, but Karlov is being put to the side. I'm going full Simic with this one. Pride is the perfect leader for the turtle deck. Every single creature is going to be a turtle. It's going to be drawing a ton of cards off its ability, and that means you're going to be drawing tons of turtles, playing a bunch of turtles, turtle power. It's going to be amazing. All right, next we've got Tolsimir Midnight's Light. This is a 5-mana Selesnya legendary creature elf scout. It's a 3/2 of lifelink, and when it enters the battlefield, create Voja Fenstalker, a legendary 5/5 green and white wolf creature token with trample. And whenever a wolf you control attacks, if Tolsimir attacked this combat, target creature an opponent controls blocks that wolf this combat if able. So this is a cool like wolf commander. Tolsimir has always had like a synergy with wolves, which is very cool. And this one is kind of like wolf lures effects, you know? When your wolves are attacking, you can force people to block it. So you can run a bunch of abilities and cards that, you know, benefit from people having to block your creatures. And it also doubles as just like straight up removal, right? If your wolves are bigger than the defender's blockers, you can just be attacking into them and then forcing blocks and killing potential threats along the way, which is great. Voja Tolsimir itself is just a 3/2 of lifelink, so I mean, you really want to have some evasion or some protection for him when he's attacking. But the wolves are at least going to be removing would-be blockers from Tolsimir's path when you're attacking from too. I think it's pretty cute. I don't know if this is going to be the wolf commander or just a nice wolf support piece in the 99. I think Tolsimir works pretty well with both of those. I think the gimmick of like forcing blocks can have some build around potential. There's just more commanders out there that I'm more interested in. So Tolsimir, I do like the concept, but I just don't like it enough that I'm going to put it in the Will Brew territory. There's just so many sweet commanders from this set. So I'm just going to put it in the Might Brew category. Next, we've got Tomic, Wielder of Law. This is a 3-mana Orzhov legendary creature human advisor. It's a 2/4, and it has affinity for planeswalkers, so it costs 1 less for each planeswalker you control. So the first time you cast Tomic, if you have a single planeswalker on the battlefield, then it only costs 2 mana. And then, you know, if you have a bunch of planeswalkers and you're recasting Tomic after it died a couple times and went back to the command zone, then you can actually get around the command tax a little bit and, you know, get him more reliably on the battlefield even though he's dying. So it's a 2/4 flying vigilance, and whenever an opponent attacks with creatures, if 2 or more of those creatures are attacking you and or planeswalkers you control, that opponent loses 3 life and you draw a card. This is a great soft deterrent from getting your planeswalkers attacked, and obviously if you are a planeswalker deck, whenever you have a planeswalker on the battlefield, all your opponents are going to be just de facto aiming at it because that's the cheapest way to remove them from the battlefield. So this is going to be a great deterrent for it. Not only can it block like small creatures very well, it has flying vigilance, it has 4 toughness, but if your opponents are committing to those attacks, then you're going to be drawing cards. And so that might be enough to stop some would-be attackers. It's not going to stop them from killing your planeswalkers if it's still a worthy trade, but you're always going to get something out of it, and it's just a nice way of getting extra value in your Super Friends deck. I absolutely love these style of like soft pillow fort cards. Now, is this a great commander, or is this just going to be a card in the 99? Well, I think this card is a slam dunk in Super Friends in the 99. If you're like Atraxa Super Friends or anything that's Orzhov plus Super Friends, I think this is really, really good. I think you can make a pretty decent Super Friends deck in Orzhov colors. However, you're lacking green for like the doubling season effect and stuff, and just general ramp sources. And you're lacking also in blue, which has like the best proliferate cards and like deep close skate and all that stuff. It would be a very interesting and unique take on Super Friends, but I think it's more likely that it's going to just show up in the 99 of like Atraxa Super Friends, and very few people are going to run it as an Orzhov commander. I just don't think it brings enough to the table to justify dropping a bunch of colors for your Super Friends deck. If it was more powerful and had like a bigger payoff for Super Friends, that I could see it, but I just don't think it's that enticing in the command zone. I'm actually going to put Tomek also in the Might Brew territory. I think if you are in a meta that is very board wipe heavy, very like creature removal heavy, then Tomek makes a lot more sense, because you can really utilize that affinity for Planeswalker, that ability to circumvent the commander tax, to keep replaying him over and over again. And that might justify him being a worthy commander over something that has more colors like Atraxa. So that would be an interesting meta call. Next, we have Tristani 3 Whispers. This is a 3-mana Selesnya 4/4 legendary creature Dryad, and it has 3 different activated abilities. The first one, pay 2, 1 and a green. Target creature gains Death Touch until end of turn. Pay either green or white. It's a hybrid. Target creature gains Vigilance until end of turn. Or pay 2 and a white, and target creature gains Double Strike until end of turn. Lots of flexibility here. Lots of activated abilities. But I'm just not excited for any of it. I guess like pay 3 mana, get something Double Strike is pretty sweet. All these abilities are very sweet, honestly. You can make a small creature trade up with Death Touch. You can make your good big creature have Vigilance, so it can be blocking still. Double Strike is just really good in general. All of these things are really good, and yet I'm just not excited for Tristani. I don't know. I just don't like spending extra mana to do anything, right? It's just a 4/4 by itself, and then it demands extra mana from you for all these abilities, and I just don't really like that too much. It could be really good in like the 99 of a deck that cares about activated abilities. I know there's a Tazri that deals with that, but as a commander, absolutely not for me. All right, this is also a meh. No trash yet. We'll see if that changes soon. All right, next we've got Vannifar Evolved Enigma. This is a 4-mana Simic 3/4 legendary creature Elf Ooze Wizard. And at the beginning of combat on your turn, choose one. Either you cloak a card from your hand, so you put it onto the battlefield face down as a 2/2 creature for 2, and then you can turn it up face up for its mana cost if it's a creature card. Or you could put a +1/+1 counter on each colorless creature you control. So this is a great card for like the face down archetype. It also has shenanigans with like Wormfang Mantra. You could do a very janky, bad infinite turn combo with Vannifar and like that, and like a Crystal Shard or whatever. But yeah, this is just a nice little role player for your face down deck. It enables face down creatures. It like lets you essentially saves you 3 mana for cloaking them, and also you can cloak things that don't have disguise, don't have morph, and like blink them or whatever to get the value, turn them into face up if they're like permanents or whatever. And then if you already have an army of face down creatures or whatever, you can start pumping them up a little bit. That's all really nice and well and good, and I can see a Vannifar deck being pretty fun if you're focusing on just like high cost permanents and you make a blink deck out of it. You could like cheat into play like an Omniscience or something with Vannifar. You cloak an Omniscience, then you blink it with like a ghostly flicker effect or whatever, and then bam, you just have an Omniscience for 3 mana investment and a card onto the battlefield. That's awesome, right? But I think this is more exciting in the 99 of like a Kadena deck or something like that. You know, it pumps up your creatures. It allows you to morph more of them per turn. That's all super fun. Yeah, I don't know. I'm just not super excited for her as like commander. I don't really want to go for like the omniscience play. I think that get kind of stale pretty quickly. But she's a good card. But as a commander, I'm kind of meh on her. I don't know. I don't personally want to brew around her. All right, next we've got Voja, Jaws of the Conclave. This is a 5-mana Naya 5/5 legendary wolf and has vigilance, trample, and ward 3. And whenever Voja attacks, put X +1/+1 counters on each creature you control, where X is the number of elves you control, and then draw a card for each wolf you control. So you can see the symbiotic relationship between Voja and Tolsimir. Tolsimir cares about wolves, Voja cares about elves, which is cool, and also wolves. And yeah, this card packs a punch, right? Like whenever it's attacking, you get to grow your army if you're like more elf heavy, and then you get to draw a bunch of cards if you're more wolf heavy. You draw at least one card because Voja itself is a wolf. It has ward 3, so it's not going to get got super easily. It's a 5-drop, so it's quite expensive, but like the payoff is super good. It obviously very much needs haste because it's an attack trigger, so you don't want to play like 5 mana, drop Voja, and then pass, and then it dies and you feel very, very sad. But if you have a haste enabler on the battlefield, you play Voja, you swing in, you immediately draw cards and pump up your army, like that's super exciting. This card is surprisingly very popular according to EDH Rec in terms of like commanders from the set. So I guess a lot of people are excited for Voja as like their wolf commander or maybe like a wolf plus elf commander deck. And yeah, I think that's really cool. I'm personally most excited of just jamming this in the 99 of my changeling deck. Like obviously all of my changelings are both elves and wolves, so I'm gonna get maximum value out of Voja attacking. The only thing that kind of sucks is it's an attack trigger, and I don't have that many haste enablers for wolves, at least non-changelings at least. So that's a little bit clunky, but I think the payoff is just so good. That said, am I personally excited to build a wolf slash elf slash both deck with Voja at the helm? Kind of, a little bit, but like not super excited for that. So I'm gonna put it in like the Might Brew category, but like in the mid section of the Might Brew category. Like it's definitely really cool, but I don't know. There's enough Will Brews so far that I'm more excited for than Voja, at least in the command zone. And finally, we come to the last commander from the set. This is Yaros, Roar of the Old Gods. This is a 4-mana Gruul legendary creature centaur druid. It's a 4/4. Other creatures you control have haste. Whenever one or more face down creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, draw a card. And whenever a face down creature you control dies, return it to the battlefield face down under its owner's control. If it's a permanent card, then turn it face up. So this is another face down matters commander, and it's all about smashing. It gives all your creatures haste, so even if you're not having face down creatures, they still have haste. That's great. Whenever face down creatures are dealing combat damage, it's generating you card advantage. That's fantastic. And then finally, it also will provide a lot of resiliency to removal. It's like whenever your creatures are dying, it comes back to the battlefield and gets turned face up. So it's actually a good thing when your creatures are dying because you get to flip them up for free, for no mana at least, when they're dying. That's amazing. So Yaros provides a ton of powerful utility for a face down deck, and I think it's a worthy commander. However, the one thing that is really hurting it is the lack of access to colors. Like face down as an archetype has a very small card pool to work with, and it's pretty much evenly distributed amongst the color pie. So being restricted to just 2 colors, while 2 colors is generally more than enough for a lot of archetypes, in the face down archetype, you kind of want to have 3 colors to really fill out the deck properly. Yaros is fantastic still as a commander. You will have slimmer pickings to fill out your deck, but I think it shines even brighter in the 99 of decks. However, there are cool things you can be doing with Yaros and makes him even more popular in the command zone, or a more popular pick in the command zone. Something like Breath of Fury is going to be absolutely busted with Yaros. Yes, this is another deck that is busted with Breath of Fury. Just knock that down. And I think you can do shenanigans with like cards like Eudora and stuff that put stuff face down as forests. I think, maybe? I'm not quite sure. Let me know in the comment section. I don't know. I think Yaros is kind of like a dark horse candidate for the face down archetype as a leader. I think you still want to have 3 colors, so I still like Kost and Kadena more, but I do think there is some justification to have him in the command zone instead. He is a very, very powerful piece. So I'm gonna put him in the Might Brute category. I don't know, maybe it's still enough to go grill face down. I don't know. All right, and that's all of the commanders ranked from Murders at Karlov Manor. No trash this time, actually. There was nothing super trashy of this set, at least in the command zone. A lot of mess, but most of the mez are actually very good in the 99. And then it was just really tough to figure out which ones I'm going to commit to brewing from the set and which ones I will try to hopefully get to at least 1 or 2 of them. There's a lot of really sweet ones, and most importantly, there is a GOAT, the pride of the Hulkblade. I really want to make that turtle deck, and this is just a perfect inclusion in the turtle deck, and it's a perfect new commander for it. Obviously, my desires for a commander are going to be different than yours, but hopefully this insight is going to be a little bit useful to you. Let me know in the comment section which commander you like the most and why, and let me know which of the Will Brew commanders you want to see first done as a budget commander or a new video. That's it for now. Like and subscribe if you like this sort of stuff, and until next time, friends, see ya!